Thanks for joining all. MC2 MC, and the guys asked me to think of a session which I was able to present today. It's like 45 minutes. Normally I try to fit in 10 practical tips to secure your corporate data with Microsoft 365. But today I think I'm going to do 7-ish, maybe 8, depending on the time and how much time Tim and the guys will give me. But let's get started. Short introduction about myself for the people who don't know me on the other side of the lines. I'm Peter Daalmans. I'm living almost 15 minutes from the Belgian border in Breda. So I live in the Netherlands, and in my daily work I help customers adopting the modern workspace and everything around it. I'm one of the leads of the Workplace Ninjas user group. I know you guys had Kenneth before. He's also one of the leads. So we also organize events like this, and hopefully we will be back on premises again because the world is slowly opening. So that's really good. Besides that, I wrote a couple of books. I'm currently also co-authoring another book, Microsoft 365 Security for IT Pros, and it's being updated almost every month. So while doing that, Microsoft awarded me as an MVP as being active in the community. But enough about me. Today I want to share some tips around identity, conditional access, and some mobile device management. And I added them, of course, to the deck. But be aware, I may talk about previews, preview features which are available to all of us, mainly public preview features. And I think once or twice while doing this session with other tips, people came back, but preview feature, we're not allowed to use that in production. You shouldn't really be using this in production because, like this was state, preview features may change or may be pulled back if for some reason a feature which Microsoft is developing in its testing in preview isn't functioning correctly, or maybe the user of the admin workflow is not the best. So you can use it. It is fully supported. So if you run into an issue, Microsoft support will help you. But like I said, it can change before they will get to the general availability stage. So be aware of that, and make sure, to at least look at it, because it's a great way to learn about what is coming in the near future. With that, some identity tips, and I just had a brief review, of course, earlier today, and I was doubting to keep this tip still in because I have this tip already quite some time now already, but I see still a lot of customers not adopting the right, or not isolating the Microsoft 365 administrator accounts, which is, I think, mandatory nowadays because mainly it came to light, for me at least, after the SolarWinds attack, is that it was an on-premises focused attack, but by misusing, for instance, the Federation Trust, or by getting access to your AAD sync, bad actors can also get access to your crown jewels in the cloud, and you never want to have that, of course. You pay Microsoft a lot of money to keep the data secure, and it would be a bad thing that people are misusing your on-premises footprint to get access to your data in the cloud. So Microsoft released around that time frame, and maybe a little bit earlier, the blog which I've added to to this deck, to this slide, about how to isolate your admin accounts. And make sure that if you have an administrator account, you're not synchronizing that account from on-premises to the cloud. Make sure it's a cloud-managed account, a cloud-only account, and make sure that it's, of course, protected by MFA, and make sure it's targeted with conditional access, so you can only use it under certain conditions. Just make sure to keep those accounts safe, and it will at least solve those, or not. It won't solve on-premises attacks, but it will solve at least the issue that they can use the on-premises environment as a jump to the cloud. If you have a company or an IT security department who is a little bit resistant to adopt fully the cloud, authenticating in the cloud, and so on and so forth, make sure that at least you use your role-based admin of the airbag model of Azure AD, and not everybody needs to be a global admin. I remember back in the days when I did IT administration, it was almost threw a big party that I had finally reached the point that I was a domain admin, or back in the days with Novell, that I was the enterprise admin. That was, maybe a goal for me back then, but you shouldn't be having those permissions if you're not using them, if you don't need them daily. So make sure to either adopt the RBAC model and to adopt the privileged, or at least the least privileged principle, so only have access what you need, or if you have the licenses, use privileged identity management. And with privileged identity management, you are able to just have a separate, of course, account for your admin role, but to request access to the global admin permissions, because you need to do this for a certain moment of time, or maybe now or in the future. And after you're done with your work, the user is reverted back to a normal user with normal user permissions, which makes sure that you don't have stale admin accounts, which can be a target for attack factor for bad actors. Because bad actors want to have access, they want to have access to your data, maybe extract your data, or maybe encrypt your data. It's that's how they earn money. Also, which is, I think, out of preview nowadays, is make sure you have some governance around your Azure AD groups, and basically also the same for your on-premises AD, but that's a little bit harder to manage from, at least from the cloud. But and make sure that if you have a still Microsoft Teams team that with data and it's not being used for X number of time, that the group is being automatically deleted. Or if somebody is not using a group, that somebody is automatically removed after, I don't know, 3 months of not using the group. Because if somebody has all those group memberships with data or with permissions to data, if the account gets compromised for some reason, then again, people have access to all the data which are related to those groups, and often, of course, Microsoft 365 groups. So configure things like group expiration, of course, adopt group naming, but also use access reviews to review access from users every, I don't know, every week, month, every quarter, or every year. And then based on the usage, you can automatically create rules that people are automatically removed, or that a manager need to say, okay, no, this person needs to still have access, or this person can be removed of the group, and therefore less people are part of have access to a certain group with data. So let's show some things in the portal. Again, without having access, you're not able to do anything. So in this case, of course, I'm saying you don't need to have access all the time to your roles. I also need to activate, of course, my roles. So I have here 3 roles available: Intune admin, global admin, and conditional access administrator. And I'm allowed to activate this now for this session. Of course, there needs to be an extra step for MFA, because I need to prove that I'm the one who's requesting this. And after I clicked OK, I'm able to request this role for X number of times. So I don't need to have 8 hours. Maybe 1 hour is enough, because after my session is done, I won't be using this access anymore. But if I want to do something on Saturday, I won't be doing something on Saturday. Don't be afraid, because I will be on holiday. But if I need to have access on a certain day, I can also plan this ahead. So for instance, if I add another approval step that my manager or the CISO needs to approve access, then you can also request access in advance. So I need to provide a reason, MC2, MC, and I need to activate it. And then you go through the 3 stages to activate this role on my account. And again, today I'm not using the approval step, because otherwise I need to switch screens and approve my own request. But in real life, for global admin, you would definitely have, or most likely have, an approval step, or you need to always have this for your work. So I'm a global admin now. If I look at active assignments of, you see that it is activated now. So if I go to groups, and let me open this portal, and I go to Azure AD, Azure AD groups, and there we have some configuration options around expiration. So by default, this feature is not enabled. So groups won't expire. By default, if you have a group membership, you will be having that of access to that group indefinitely. You can, however, of course, configure a custom value, or maybe 180 days or 1 year. An email contact for if a group owner is not configured, and you can pick and choose Microsoft 365 groups which may be available. I don't have a lot of groups in my tenant, so I had selected, configured it to all. So if a group is being created, automatically the group lifetime will be also configured. Regards to policy naming, you can add a block list of names that can be used as a group name. So if you have words that may or are not allowed to be used in your group structure, in your group naming, then you can add them here. And you can configure a prefix or a postfix based on an attribute or just a string. So you can say, okay, it needs to be GRP as a prefix. I don't know if there's any use case for it, but you can say, okay, the post of the suffix is the department. And here you can at least a little bit standardize your group naming, because if you enable users to create teams themselves or to create Office 365 or Microsoft 365 groups themselves, they basically can think of any name. And with using the prefix and or the suffix, you can at least get some naming standard in your environment. If we look at the privileged access, to the access review, sorry. Then you will see that I already have two groups configured for access review. One is completely empty, so it doesn't have anything to review. And the other one is IT support, and it should be having one member. So this one will automatically analyze this group every quarter. So if you look at scheduling, you see every quarter, and then the people who needs to react need to react in a certain amount of time. So if we look at the results, it should come up with this user. It is currently not reviewed yet, but at least the recommended action, which is on the list for the manager or the admin, is to deny access because this user hasn't been signing in for the last 30 days. So it also gives you an advice how to cope with stale access, users that have stale access to groups. Everything is audited, and so if you have a change or you approve something, it will be added to the list. So you can also report on compliance for compliance purposes. Conditional access, and conditional access is a very important part of the Microsoft 365 story. Adding data to the cloud, you want to make sure that at least people only get access under the conditions you define. And by default, every user is allowed to do anything, and that's a little bit different than when configuring a firewall, because on the firewall everything is blocked by default, and then you need to open holes in the defense to allow users to do something. And with conditional access, that's the other way around. So you need to configure the conditions under what conditions the users are allowed to access, for instance, Exchange Online. And this can be really hard for a lot of companies. And I see a lot of companies struggling with this. And there's more and more guidelines around this subject. And one of the Microsoft guys also created a really extensive document about creating conditional access rules based on personas. And this certain group of users are allowed to do this. And based on this persona, 3 or 4 conditional access rules will be created, and another persona has 3 or 4 other conditional access rules. But it's for a lot of companies, it's really hard. So since I don't know, a couple of months right now, Microsoft created conditional access templates, and which can help customers a lot to at least configure the basic conditional access of conditional access rules based on certain scenarios which are described. So we will have a look at that in a second. Another thing, I'm a big advocate about modern IT, and also modern IT on mobile phones, because you don't want to bother your users with mobile device management and really complex pins and I don't know, really weird rules to lock down the device, because there's email on the device. You know that the day you configure things like that and people are using their own mobile phone, they find other ways to get productive. So I'm a big fan of just using app protection without enrollment. And app protection without enrollment allows users to configure Outlook, and then while configuring Outlook, the app is automatically protected. There are at least a couple of things you need to think about. If you look at the pictures below, if you see my mouse, you see the red part of the donut, and that means that for some reason those apps, and those are high numbers, are not protected, which means that people can copy data out of the corporate app to personal mail, which you may want to block by default. And here you see also that users don't have a license. That's not good, because for a long time we were used to configure a conditional access rule to require approved client tab. So only Outlook could be used to get access to Office 365, which was great. But if you, for some reason, forgot to assign a license, or you didn't select the app, Outlook, in the app protection policy, or for some reason putting the app protection policy to the app was timed out, or maybe the app protection policy wasn't assigned at all, then the app was allowed to access because it was an approved client app. Microsoft worked, like in the last 1.5, maybe 2 years, they worked on a different solution to add this to the scenario I described earlier, to require the app protection policy. So basically to check if the app protection policy is assigned and is applied to the app. So how does this work? In the ideal world, you should use both in conjunction. So for the require approved client app, the user logs into Azure AD in the Outlook app. It's being redirected via the Authenticator app or the Complete Portal app, depending on the platform, to the Azure AD STS. It will check if the approved app is being used, and that's a unique code in the conditional access service which is being checked. If the approved client app is being used, the user gets a token and access is allowed. Again, if you don't have a policy, if you don't have a license assigned to the user won't get any app protection policy, because that's how it works. Without a license, you're not able to use Intune at all. So if you use this together with the require app protection policy, then you can actually check if the app protection policy is being applied. So the user logs in again, and it's being done in the same process, of course. Next to checking the STS service for the approved app, it will also check if Intune has reported the app protection policy to be applied for this app. If so, we get the access token. If not, we will with blocked access. To me, this is an awesome addition to conditional access, and very, very happy that it's finally out of preview. It took some time. So first, before I show you how this actually looks in the at the user side of the world, let's have a look at the app protection policies at all, because there's if you don't look here every day, also here a lot of things changes, and one thing I could add as a tip, but which is changed, is one really downside in the past of using app protection policies was that you needed to pick and choose the apps you wanted to protect, just basically like here. So you needed to select blue jeans, board, box, and then click select. But then tomorrow or next week, Microsoft found a new partner which is supporting the app protection policies and added this to the list of supported apps. So you needed to go back in, you needed to watch the blogs, what's new of Intune, and it's a lot of work. Luckily, Microsoft changed its behavior, and now we have, besides of picking cherry picking the apps, we also have the option to just select all apps. So if a new app is being added, we are automatically targeting this with the app protection policy. Or maybe only the Microsoft apps, because you don't want to use, or you're not using Box, or you're not using any other app from what vendor, then you only want to have the Microsoft apps being targeted automatically, or maybe only the core apps. And there's a complete list. Here you see which apps are part of the core. If we switch and close this one, then you see that the list for all Microsoft apps is a little bit longer. And depending on the platform, the all apps is like up to 75 nowadays. So it took some time for the adoption, but it's really good nowadays. So for some reason, if you forget to assign this app protection policy to a group of users, or your user is not in the right group, the app protection policy won't be assigned, of course. Quickly look at the conditional access part. If you go to security and then conditional access, and here I have one example. Just this feature, so to say, is only available for iOS or Android. So you need to explicitly select one or both of the platforms. And here you basically see the two options. And also, if you look here, then you see the list of the approved client apps from Microsoft only. And a smaller number of the apps that support the new SDK, which is needed to check if the app protection policy is applied. So be aware that this can not work, or this won't work for all 75-ish apps. And you see some third parties here. So hopefully software vendors will adopt a new SDK with the software policy assurance quickly. So if we look at the end user side of things, display. So we are opening Outlook, and this is a non-managed device. So I add my my email address, my UPN, and then the next step, I will be redirected to the Authenticator app because it's iOS platform. I need to have the Authenticator app to authenticate towards the STS. And here you zoom it. You see that access is being denied because my app is not protected. I know what happened, but I won't spoil it for you. So if we quickly move over. Then you see that I switch back to an older version of the console, and for some reason I forgot to assign the app protection policy. So I assign it. Pick and choose the group I want to use. Pick EMS licenses because also my license assignment is being done to this group. If we click select and then click save, then everything should be in order. So we switch back to the client and we start Outlook again. We are able to retry, and then via the Authenticator app we should be logged on. You see that I'm not blocked again, so we choose maybe later, and the app protection policy is instantly assigned, and I need to configure a PIN to secure the app which is being used. So the app is closed, and I'm needing to configure a PIN, and that's a good way of at least making sure that the apps on non-managed devices are protected. So for the last two tips, I added filtering assignments, and they went out of preview maybe a couple of months ago. When assigning policies to users, and I often in most cases I assign policies to users because Intune in contrary to MCM is user focused, user centric. So I want to make sure that if a user logs on which device, it's always protected the same. But now with Windows 10 and Windows 11, there are different platforms, so maybe policies are acting differently. For instance, the start menu of Windows 11 is different than Windows 10. So you might want to assign this still to a group of users, but tune the assignment based on filtering on the platform, so that this policy is only applied to Windows 10 and not Windows 11, and vice versa, of course. So definitely look into filtering assignments. And last tip I want to show you is at least control access to on-premises environments, and we can do that with Microsoft 365 in two ways. One Intune native solution is by using the Microsoft Tunnel, which is an Intune instance of an Intune instance, a Linux instance on Docker, which you need to install on your premises, and publish this through your firewalls to the outside world, so that the devices can access that instance. It needs to be configured both, but also to your internal core plan, so that you can access your internal services. With conditional access, you are able to control access based on what platform that's being used or what condition is being used. And of course, with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you're able to configure this. So the other solution, and which is there already for a long time and broadly used, is by using the app of the Azure App Proxy. It's a service you are using in the cloud. You need to install an agent, number 4, in your DMZ or on your premises, which at least from a place where it can access the app proxy service, but also the internal web services you want to publish. So basically what happens is the user logs into a browser, it contacts the app proxy service, and that service has DDoS prevention out of the box. It handles your authentication. It can add conditional access, etc., etc. The agent you install is setting up an external connection to the app proxy, and over that external connection, the internal web service is being proxied to the client. And of course, this is also controlled by conditional access. The two main differences is that the app protection of the app proxy service is mainly used for 443, so HTTPS and HTTP traffic. The Tunnel VPN solution can also be used for other legacy applications which use different kind of communication protocols. The world is changing very quickly, and I didn't have the time to adjust my demo, but Microsoft has created a Tunnel app to make sure to set up the connection. It's like a VPN client, but they are merging. They announced this, I think, last year at Ignite. They merged the Tunnel app with Defender, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint already for some time on Android, but now they also released it publicly in public preview last month for iOS. But unfortunately, I don't have it on my device. But let's have a look at the legacy way then, or at least it's still the production way. So here we have at least the end user experience. The device is enrolled, and it's compliant. And it is compliant, yes. So what I do now, I have here the Tunnel app, and it is already connected with my my on-premises environment. But to show you the difference between the two, and is to that in this case, let's use a little bit zoom it. I'm just using a non-routable private IP address to get the website in the iOS device, and then of course I need to click on the device itself. And then if I want to use the app proxy service, you see that I'm using an external URL, and you see that it's also going through conditional access. You quickly saw the Microsoft login redirection. And this is a public domain name. You can use the Microsoft default naming msfproxy.net, but you can also use your own internal of your own DNS names, but you need to provide your own certificate then. Couple of minutes left. Let's quickly run through the tunnel gateway screens. And here you see that mine is unhealthy. I had some power issues. For some reason, it's the health check isn't done recently, so it gives me an error that the server is offline. But as you've seen, I had a connection. So basically, what you need to do is to configure your environment in Microsoft Intune. Configure your IP address range, the ports, your DNS suffix, etc., etc. If you want to have split tunneling or not, you need to create a site, and then you can create a server. You need to download the script, and then the magic happens, and you can run an MS Tunnel Ubuntu instance within Hyper-V. And I'm not a Linux guy, definitely not. For that reason, I added a URL to the blog of Marius Sundbu. It's a really good step-by-step guide. So if you want to have a go with this, it's pretty easy. The only thing is that you need to have a public IP address which is reachable for your users, for your test devices. With that, join the community. Of course, you're already part of this community, and there are some others also hanging around. Reddit is a great source. If there are any questions, I will hang around. And with that, thank you very much for listening in.